Hey everyone, in this video I just wanted to propose a challenge to anyone who's even slightly interested in slimestone flying machines. Now, about a year ago, I had the idea to try to make the slowest flying machine possible. It's fairly easy to make fast flying machines. For example, you can make something like this. Not like that. And this moves pretty fast and is used very commonly in actual slimestone applications. But I wanted to challenge myself to come up with the slowest flying machine possible. And I'm going to show a few flying machines that I kind of built and the thought process I went through trying to make the slowest one possible. So if you want to challenge yourself, I challenge you to try to build your own before I kind of show off some ideas, and then you can come back and check out what I've built. Maybe it'll inspire some of your own ideas that are slower flying machines than mine. So my first idea was to just kind of try to make one that fills as much space as possible, just by chaining together a bunch of elements all into one giant machine. So this is kind of a flying machine that's tileable in all three dimensions. You can make this taller, you can make it longer and wider, only limited by your render distance, really. This is just a 16 by 16 by, I believe, 15 tall one, so I could easily just take the speed of this and divide it by whatever numbers I need to kind of get a theoretical slowest flying machine using this concept. So if I start this machine, and I'll just put that obsidian there to stop it, it takes about 66 seconds for this whole machine to move forward a block. And if we look over here, the time it takes to move forward a block is proportional to your render distance squared. That's assuming you build it from 0 to world height. So it's only based on kind of the area it takes up, and that scales up with your render distance. So this is a quadratic function here. Keep that in mind for later. And this constant is arbitrary. In this case, for, I guess, a render distance of 0 and a height of 15, this constant would be 66 seconds. Anyways, moving on. This machine, again, the time it takes is 1.1 minutes. If I were to fill all loaded chunks at 32 render distance, so kind of the largest maximum possible machine, this is in pre 1.18, so a height limit of 256, it would take 54 real-life days to move forward a block. So that's a really good start. Obviously, if we build it in 1.18 with the extra height limit, it would take a little bit longer. So 81 days is the slowest flying machine using this concept. I'm sure you could compact this down, like there's all this unused space here. So if you wanted to, you could probably make it more compact. But I would say the limit here is probably within an order of magnitude of 81 days. And the next idea I had was to kind of do something based on random ticks. Random ticks are a very slow feature in the game and something that is very compact. So I came up with a flying machine based on mushroom spread. So mushrooms spread very slowly, and what happens is when this mushroom spreads to this podzol, you can also use mycelium or myelium because mushrooms can spread at any light level. This machine will move forward a single block, and it will move this podzol over here and reset, so this mushroom can keep growing forward. And I don't use carpet mod, so I can't do like a tick warp to kind of empirically measure how fast this moves, but based on just speeding up random tick speed, which is not a perfect calculation, I got that this machine moves at a rate of 1 block every 20 hours, which is really, really good considering how tiny this machine is. Again, if I were to fill all loaded chunks in 1.16, this would take 54 days. That's let's see, what is that? Like 60 times slower. So if I were to fill 1/60th of the loaded chunks at 32 render distance, that's 64 loaded chunks. So if I were to multiply this, if I were to bring it to world height and then make it 8 times wider and 8 times longer, that would match the speed of this. So already we're getting somewhere, but this is kind of a dead end because it's not expandable like this one is. The time it takes is kind of a determined constant. So at this point we're kind of stuck, and this is, I would think that this is the slowest random tick speed based flying machine possible. Obviously, if you could figure out a way to space these podzels apart further, the mushroom has a lower chance of spreading, so you could build something more complicated where you have a podzol all the way over here or something, and the mushroom could spread all the way over here, and it would somehow reset the podzol. But that would be much more complicated. This is already pretty complicated, but it is able to be pretty compact. So where do I go from here? Obviously this slows down quadratically. This is constant. What's next? Well, I wanted to come up with some kind of machine that would slow down exponentially, because that would be literally exponentially slower than this as you take the limit as render distance goes to infinity. So what I mean by that is this machine here is based on a binary counter. Each piston on this side is 1 bit of a big binary number. I'm not counting this one here, this is just part of the moving forward mechanism. So each piston starting here going all the way down is 1 bit. So this is a 9-bit machine, and it moves forward once every minute or so. If I were to add another bit, which is very easy to do, it takes twice as long to move forward. So if I were to expand this just a little bit, maybe another chunk or so, this would already be 32 times slower. So this is very promising. So if we look here, the time it takes is proportional to 2 to the render distance, effectively. And so if you were to build machines at various bit lengths, here are some of the numbers. So at 9 bits, this takes just under a minute to move, and here are the dimensions, fairly compact. As we move to more bits, this, if we were to build 15 bits, it would take an hour, and it still takes up barely any space whatsoever. 20 bits would take just over a day. 28 bits would take about a year, and that's 96 blocks long. So let's take this to the extreme. If we were to set our render distance to 32, that would mean we would load 65 chunks. So that means we could build this machine 64 chunks long, and if we stand our player right in the middle to load the whole thing, that means we can build 340 bits, since each bit takes 3 blocks wide. So that would be a 1022 block long machine. And, oh, I forgot to write the units here, but anyways, this would take 7.45 times 10 to the 93 years. This number is incredibly large. 10 to the 93 is a huge number, obviously something that the human brain can't really comprehend how large it is. But anyways, this is kind of the maximum that this machine can achieve. And I've built it over here. You can just trust me that it goes all the way out to 1022 blocks. But I also want to showcase kind of how this machine works. So I'm going to showcase it with this about 1 minute machine here. And I have it set so that it's going to move forward pretty fast. So the way it works is if I just add an observer here, it will start counting in binary. So you can kind of see this in action here, and it's going to move forward in a second. So once all the observers move back, they all push forward, the binary rolls over, everything moves forward a block, and the binary counter starts up again. That last part there kind of resets it, so this bit turns to a 1, and we have to wait for all the other bits to turn to 1s, and then it will roll over to 0 and move forward again. And to stop it, you can just remove that observer. It's worth pointing out that when you make an observer clock, when you place an observer, it's actually a different speed than when you push an observer with a piston. So when you first start up the machine by placing an observer, it actually counts pretty slow. But when the machine moves forward and pistons move the binary counter, you can see that this observer clock is faster. So this machine will actually move at half the speed for at least the first time before it rolls over. So right now it's going to take about 2 minutes for it to roll over because this is the slower vein of an observer clock. But once it moves forward, I can simulate that by moving all of these back. It will all move forward, and now the binary counter is going significantly faster. I just figured that was worth pointing out. Feel free to check my math here, by the way, it could be wrong. I'm also going to do a quick tutorial on this machine if you want to stick around for that, but before I do that, I do want to challenge you guys, see if you can come up with something better for me. You could either compact this machine down a bit, so that each bit takes up 2 blocks, or you could come up with a different system entirely. I think something that's promising is a machine that moves back and forth, and every time it moves back and forth, it moves 1 block around. So here's a video by Ilmango, just showcasing one of these machines. Every time this flying machine moves back and forth, the stoppers at each end move forward. So he even mentions in the video, the only limit to this machine is the world border. And this would be impossible to load by a single player at 32 chunk render distance, but the thing is, a player could ride in a minecart on here, so it could always load the moving parts of the machine. This is also very practical in terms of actual slimestone applications. It's used in quarries and world eaters, all kinds of different slimestone applications. This one moves parallel to the direction of the back and forth engine. A lot of the times you'll see them move perpendicular, so every time this moves back and forth, the machine will move forward a block. Anyways, so I figured there's also some potential with that. Obviously, if you were to build it to the world border, I ran the numbers over here. Using this kind of design at the world border, it would take 1.9 years. So not very resource intensive, but it does take up a lot of space, and it is a fairly slow flying machine. So now I'm just going to quickly show how to build this. So we don't need these or this. So I'm going to build up a quick 8-bit machine. So the way you start it off is by a line of 8 sticky pistons with observers in front of them. So there's 2 bits. And there's 8. I do need a trapdoor for this, I forgot. And what you can do now is take all of these bits and you can add slime blocks in a bit of an L shape to each of them. And once you get to the back, we are going to do something a little different because we have to deal with the observer clock that runs the binary counter. So what we do for that is we can add an observer right here, connected to a slime block, and this is the lower part of the observer counter. Now we can add sticky pistons and observers. This will retract the whole thing forward. Obviously this is moving each bit forward a block. Now we have to get to the most complicated bit in the front, which is the whole rollover system, in which when this observer gets pushed into this piston, the whole machine will move forward one block and one block only. So the way we do that is we can put a sticky piston on top of this normal piston backwards, connect those up with slime, put a slime block here, an observer here, face two observers into this. This is very important here that you have the observer facing into the other observer. I'll explain why in a second. Trapdoor here. You can also use a note block or a fence gate or an iron trapdoor. Any of them work. They just need to cause a block update to a downward facing piston. This piston can also be facing sideways or forward. Doesn't really matter. I'll just face it down. And a sticky piston here against the trapdoor. Slime blocks connecting everything. And we need to connect this sticky piston to the whole retracting system. So that's pretty easy to do. Just connect it up. And is there anything else over here? Oh yes. We also need to retract the top observer of the binary clock. So the way we do that is connecting it to this slime block. So we can connect slime all the way back here. And now we just need to break up this whole slime line into segments that are within the push limit. So obviously the push limit's 12, so we can start counting blocks, and once we hit 12, we cut it off. So these blocks, this observer and this piston, are actually going to be pulled by this slime block. Because what happens is this observer is pushed forward, pushes this piston, sticky piston is retracted, and this observer is pushed forward, so it's connected to this underside of the slime block. So when the sticky piston retracts it, it will retract the observer as well as this piston. So we can start counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And after the 10th block, we can break the 11th, add a sticky piston, and an observer. So again, this is the 10th block, and it will be pulling 11 and 12. And again, we can do the same thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Break the 11th, add a sticky piston, add an observer, and the machine is done. Obviously, except for the second observer to the observer clock. So when you first start the machine, it's going to move forward, and it's going to immediately stop the binary clock, and obviously something's gone wrong here. What has gone wrong here? Oh, I placed this observer wrong. And actually, this is a good opportunity to describe what's going on. So when the machine pushes forward, it kind of immediately stops the binary counter. Then, with all this delay here, it will then, with all these pistons stopped, it can now push forward these pistons. Because if the binary counter is going, and one of these pistons is extended, then the slime block won't be able to push it forward. So then, this line of delay will pull everything forward and start at the binary counter again, resetting the whole machine. So that's how this machine works, and feel free to experiment with it, compact it, improve on it, and please leave a comment if you find something slower than this machine. And by this machine, I mean that machine. Thanks for watching.